Let's first define learning intentions and success criteria. Learning intentions are what students should know, be able to do, and or understand by the end of a lesson, whereas success criteria are the concrete tasks that students perform to demonstrate their understanding and the degree of proficiency that is required. So another way to think of it is that learning intentions are what students are learning, whereas the success criteria is this concrete task that we will use to measure whether students have got it. So using these definitions, let's do a quick activity. First, read each statement below and then decide whether you think it's a learning intention or a success criteria statement. Pause the video and then resume when you're ready to check your answers. Okay, let's go through these answers. Number 1, students will be able to manipulate layers through ordering. So this is an example of a learning intention. It explains the objective, manipulate layers through ordering, but it doesn't give any details about the task that we will use to determine whether students know how to do this. So are we simply asking students to verbally explain how to do this? Are we having them do it in an actual project? Are we giving them a multiple choice assessment? The concrete task is missing, so it must be a learning intention. Let's look at number 2. Students will create a week-long menu that meets the requirements for proficient on the nutrition principles rubric. This is a success criteria. How do we know? Because it gives us the concrete task, create a week-long menu, as well as the level of proficiency required to determine whether students have mastered the objective. They need to score a proficient on the nutrition principles rubric. All right, number 3, I can add and subtract 3-digit numbers. This statement actually tricks a lot of people because it sounds like a task and therefore it often gets used as a success criteria, but actually it's a skill and therefore this is a learning intention. We don't know whether students are adding numbers from a word problem, answering one problem with just numbers, answering 10 problems, writing a paragraph about how to perform the skill, or doing a multiple choice test. There is no concrete task or measure of proficiency here. So does it count if the student understands regrouping but momentarily thinks 7 plus 7 equals 16, or do they have to have a 100% perfect answer? So to turn this into a success criteria, we would need more information. Number 4, I will be able to group a paragraph that makes an accurate prediction about upcoming weather using today's clouds and scientific vocabulary. This one is definitely a success criteria. It gives that concrete task, writing a paragraph, and also several measures of proficiency. The prediction has to use today's clouds to make that prediction. It needs to include scientific vocabulary, and which would presumably be used correctly. Number 5, for this last one, I can explain the significance of the Magna Carta. It also often gets mistaken for a success criteria. People will frequently tell me, but the task is that you're explaining. Okay, but how? How are we explaining? Are students having conversations with one another? Are they writing a 5-page essay? Are they creating a documentary? Are they just answering true or false questions? We don't have a concrete task. This one is also missing the necessary level of proficiency. So do students need to know the general idea of the Magna Carta's significance, or do they need to be able to look at the effects across history, documents that reflect ideas from the Magna Carta, etc.? So what will this actually look like in the HCS curriculum? Well, each learning intention will be in student-friendly language. And this is very important, as much of the power to impact student achievement with learning intentions comes from actually sharing them with students. The learning intentions will also explain what students will know, understand, or be able to do by the end of the learning experiences, and in content areas where it makes sense, learning intentions will be in the order in which teachers should teach them. Similarly, success criteria will also be in student-friendly language. And again, teachers should share the success criteria with students multiple times throughout a lesson. And lastly, don't forget that the success criteria explain how student learning will be measured using a concrete task and will also outline the level of proficiency that is expected in order to determine student understanding.